Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, Monday morning, August the 16th, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and I'm just happy to be able to do these shows. It's really a privilege is what it is. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate it and had a great weekend and did some extra shows, and it's just awesome. I hope it's helping everybody else. I hope that this information is helpful and useful to you as well. So I know it is for me. This week I wanted to take a look at shame, toxic shame, and whatnot caused from child abuse, and what it is, what is shame and what is shame that is associated with child abuse and adult survivors and different things like that. So that's what we're going to be looking at this week. I found some really great information along with Elizabeth Brawley, Southern Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. We actually took a look at shame on one of the shows last week, or might have been the week before. But we had saved all this information. I saved it and was looking through it. We didn't have time to really go into it, and because we just had the 1 hour show, and I wanted to go back and then really re-look at it, because this is very something that I never really even associated with the abuse that I suffered as a child. Shame, I mean, I remember hearing things like shame on you and you for your behavior, this type of thing when I was growing up, but I didn't know exactly what shame was. And looking at it, it's just so interesting to see it and to see it right there in front of my eyes. What I was experiencing was shame, and I didn't even know it. So, hopefully this will be interesting for people and helpful, right? So I shared the link in the chat room. The chat room is up, and we're going to get started here. I want to remind everybody I'm not a counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my blog talk shows because I really want to get this information out to people. I'm always studying and looking for information for myself, as I'm a survivor of child abuse, and everybody that listens to my shows knows that. I say this on every show, but you never know when somebody's going to tune in for the first time, so I do just briefly mention that. And also, that you have to listen at your own discretion. Topics of abuse are very sensitive, and a lot of people have a hard time listening to topics of abuse, let alone seeing the actual headlines out there, with the children dying, today, or being, maimed and tortured and end up in the hospital with all these abuse-related injuries, right? The headlines are hard enough to look at, and then when people start talking about abuse and what it does to people and what it's all about and how harmful it really is, people really get uncomfortable. So I'm not uncomfortable with it because I grew up with it and spent my whole life dealing with abuse, right? Child abuse, domestic violence, and whatnot. So I'm perfectly okay listening to it and talking about it and everything else, but that's because I was much more uncomfortable as a child being abused than I am now talking about it. So that's the thing. A lot of people have a hard time listening to this stuff, so if you're not in a good enough, safe enough place, really, feeling good about listening to it, you have to listen at your own discretion. You could always come back and listen another time when you're feeling like it, or if you just turn it off if it's going to bother you, right? And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you. That's my legal disclaimer. It's not even just for that. It's because I care about children. I'm fighting to stand up for children's lives. Actually, that's what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. And internet safety is such a huge issue with the problems going on in the world today. There are so many sexual predators out there, child sexual predators, who are looking to get a hold of children, and they will do anything that they can to get a hold of children online. So you got to get the information on how to stay safe online. It's no good to live in fear as a child. Don't want to be growing up with a lot of fear and a lot of, anxiety and, afraid to live, right? That's no good. But I think that education is the key, and learning how to keep yourself safe, that is the key, right? So, there's websites out there full of great information. All you have to do is type into your browser, internet safety, online safety for children. And if you're a parent out there listening to this and you just never really studied up on how to keep your family safe while they're surfing the net, there's information out there for parents on how to keep your children safe, right? So make sure you get that information. I did a whole two-week topic of that back in the last winter, around December sometime. So it'd be tricky to go through all my archives. I have over 330 shows, 340 shows or something like that. It's really hard to get back to the first shows just because you got to go page by page by page, right? And then they're not really labeled individually; they're just labeled with my show label. So I'm going to eventually go back and relabel all of those. Take me some time. I'll probably need a couple weeks to do it. So, but yeah, just type into your browser "internet safety, online safety for children," this type of thing, and it will bring up websites with good information on there on how to keep yourself safe. So we're going to get right into this topic, and I want to start this morning with an article that I found from findingstone.com, www.findingstone, Findingstone, findingstone.com /professionals/monographs/rage, shame, and the death of love.htm. And this is called Rage, Shame, and the Death of Love by William Cloke, Cloke, PhD. And I just think this is so interesting. It's a monologue, and he goes on. I read this morning, and I was kind of looking at it yesterday. It's so interesting. The whole issue with shame. It's actually very. It's hard to look at, if you're as a survivor of child abuse, because you see, right in front of you, what happened because of the abuse to cause us this shame, and what the shame actually is inside, what it actually is internalized inside, right? So it's quite interesting. I want to read through this, and we'll talk about it as we go this week, and I don't know how long it's going to take us to get through this. It's a huge article. And then I have a lot more websites that I want to take a look at that we found, Elizabeth Brawley and myself found, on shame and toxic shame and the shame associated with incest and sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, and the shame associated with just all the different types of child abuse, right? So I want to start with this article. So thanks everybody for tuning in. And it says, I'm just reading right from the page from this website here. This William Cloke, PhD, says, concealed deep within the human psyche lies an enduring world, a kingdom which exists and yet is separate from our awareness. Within this shrouded domain reside the remnants of intensely painful experiences that were propelled out of sight for safekeeping. And these imprints that were thrown into the unconscious eventually form into a structure that without warning becomes conscious, as if these early experiences were happening in the present moment. From this hidden place comes rage, born out of painful humiliations, and this shame shifts our sense of reality and casts a shadow over our experiences with others. It's interesting. From this hidden place comes rage, born out of painful humiliations, and I can totally relate to that, because when I was 30 and my mom passed away, I went down to see her before she died, and I saw her on her deathbed, and she said, "Oh, I wasn't a good mother," and but she never apologized. She didn't say, "I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I'm sorry I hurt you." She just said, that's her way of saying the same thing. Probably was just to say that I wasn't a good mother, and we said, "No, we loved you, Mom, and you were a good mother," because she was dying. We didn't want our last words to be all hateful, and I said we all loved you very much, and I returned from the funeral, came home, and within a very, very short time, the rage that was inside of me started to come out, because out of this little hidden place that I had kept all this rage subdued, because I loved my mom so much, I loved my dad so much, and I didn't want to hurt them, and I didn't want them to see the pain that they caused me, because it would hurt them. I mean, I really believe that it would, and even my dad today, excuse me, if he really knew, excuse me, what I went through, it would hurt him, right? Because he, as much as he doesn't admit that he had anything to do with it and was not abusing anyone in the home, he would still feel like, wow, this is terrible. You know what I mean? He's, he's not a complete monster. It's just that he's psychologically ill, right? He's got a mental illness, and he was born in a very strange situation back in like 1923, and his parents, I don't know, they were so warped, who knows what happened to him. He doesn't even talk about it, but it's so bizarre, That is the thing. From this hidden place comes rage, born out of painful humiliations. All of a sudden, when my mom passed away, I realized that when I came back home, like I was saying, rage started to build up on the inside of me. I think it had always been there, and that it just started to need to come out, My mom had passed on, and I knew I was never, ever going to get any reconciliation with her as a child, that I would never be told and nurtured, told that I was loved and nurtured and cared for, this inner child of mine who needed so badly for my mom just to love her and to accept her for who she was, and to tell her how sorry she was for hurting her, and I was never going to hear that. I was never going to hear, that I was her special child, and that was so painful. It was so extremely painful. I started to remember the abuse, and it came to me. And for a year, I cried, and I was just so miserable for about a year, and had to let all that kind of come, as it needed to, right? Excuse me. So it's just so important to look at this stuff. It says, what could be the origin of our tendency to repress pain? The answer may lie in two different areas. First, when an infant experiences acute pain caused from powerful breaks in the emotional connection from parent to child, the intensity is so severe it cannot be emotionally or intellectually processed. Instead, these powerful emotions are torn away from the conscious or split off from awareness. And this splitting occurs because the infant has not formed enough of a self-structure to deal adequately with such feeling states. And this unprocessed or disorganized material can be referred to as chaotic or overwhelming. Out of the necessity to make order out of chaos, an internal system forms to manage these elements so that they remain secure and safe from exposure. We refer to this system as the shame, envy, rage, guilt cycle. And a second explanation as to why this unconscious system exists may have something to do with a new primitive stage of evolutionary development when life is organized around hunting. To survive physical and emotional suffering, it may have become necessary to suppress the memory of pain so the hunt could continue. Though we may no longer need this psychological reflex, it remains a force which can cause distortions in our thinking and feeling. And this territory of the unconscious endures as a primeval and intensely emotional place, locked away from our conscious minds. So shame can be best described as an emotional wound to the self for which one blames oneself as if one's person is the reason. Something like, the reason that I get yelled at is because I am bad. This is what he says here. When personal shame is stimulated by an event that is similar to the original shaming experience, the pain energy converts to rage as it becomes conscious. The shame system operates on its own because we are not in contact with the pain, and therefore it appears spontaneously. And this pain is organized around sets of values, beliefs, defenses, and wishes, which translate messages to this private world, holding it in, or when it cannot be controlled, suddenly releasing it. And these vigorous wounds are capable of generating massive shifts of unprocessed pain that can flood the body with fierce rage. As the person matures, the force of this energetic rage is often so intense that it blasts out of the unconscious into the world of others. And so this is exactly, I totally relate to this. That's what happened to me. And, I was, I still haven't probably really released my rage, but I thought if I actually, I wanted to go and scream somewhere, I wanted to go and let all of this rage come out. Now, I didn't want to hurt anybody or cause somebody to call the police because I was screaming. So I thought I'd have to go somewhere very, very far away from, out in the mountains or out in a big field somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, so that nobody would think that somebody was killing somebody, and I could just scream and let this scream come out, because this scream was so deafening inside of me. It was so intense. I thought it would probably deafen the universe if I let it out. And I thought about the damage that it might cause me to do that, because it very well might not be able to recover from something like that if I was actually to let that rage go and naturally and let it explode. I was concerned that possibly psychologically I would not be able to return after I was to let that out, because the wounds are so deep and they are so big within that little child, that inner child of myself, that they're like, they're like, 10 times bigger than the Grand Canyon. They're huge. And so I thought, well, I don't even know if I could survive that, letting all that rage out. I'm almost better to control it and let little bits out and try to do it that way. But I wanted to go out and just scream and let it out, and grieve. And I did a lot of grieving, but I wasn't screaming. But I wanted to scream and grieve and pound the earth and pound this earth as hard as I could to make waves, to make noise, to let this out, because that's how intense it is inside of me, right? So that's about the only way I could describe it. So, instead of that, I kind of keep it very controlled, and I just allow myself to feel things slowly and controlled, and very much when they need to. So, sometimes I have to back off from things, in my life. Like, people want to do things, and especially family members will want to get together and stuff. If I'm not in the right frame of mind and I'm experiencing some things that I need to let go or work through, I will quite often just cancel out. And I know my family doesn't understand because they don't. Their rage is so far back in there that they wouldn't even know what I was talking about because theirs hasn't come to the surface yet. So, I just feel sorry for them because I know that my sister especially is someday going to have to face this, and I hope it's not when she's like 70 and has no coping mechanisms to deal with it, but it has to come on their own time, you know what I mean? I believe that, it's just up to the individual if they want to go and get help or face these things, right? It's because it's hard. It's very hard on us. It says shame wounding from from parents and significant others most often begins during infancy and continues throughout life. Because this inner world of shame operates in obscurity, it can be characterized as a jungle, wild and primitive. The shift from a shameful stimulation to a rage response is a means of avoiding agony and voiding it at the same time. And this constantly expanding jungle of the unconscious produces an enormous amount of negative energy. Rage energy is particularly intense because it is combined with a deep-rooted fear of retaliation and abandonment. And the expression of rage mixed with terror is indicative of major emotional breaks occurring at a time when the infant was utterly dependent on the parents for survival. It says a neglected infant or child cannot risk expressing rage because it may lead to even further loss or abuse. And if the suffering from abuse continues for extended periods during childhood, the pain will intensify and further develop the shame-rage system. So, it's just the infant or the child, they can't express that rage because then, of course, they've been doing that, their parent or parents or caregivers will probably abuse them even more, whether it's physical, emotional, verbal. That's just it. Abused children are not allowed to express what's happening to them quite often. I don't know, maybe there's someone out there who has experienced that where they were allowed to voice voice their opinion about the abuse or voice how they were feeling. But most people I've talked to were not allowed to. If they did, they were beaten more, because they even bothered to speak up about it, right? That was my case because my parents grew up in the 1920s when it was better to, was believed that children should be seen and not heard. So if you opened up your mouth, you quite often got a good backhand or, you got verbally abused and sent off somewhere, because, that was on a good day, right? And on a bad day, you'd be beaten because, they'd be like, oh, I'm not listening to another word coming out of your mouth, and, down would come the belt or the book or the shoe or the fist or whatever, my parents could get a hold of. So, this is the thing, right? Children just can't express this stuff, so it stays so deep inside of us, right? And then again, we also don't want to be, I think, looked at, rejected because of it, right? When we're older, if we all of a sudden allow ourselves to start speaking out about this abuse, like myself right now, which I'm doing daily basis, talking to the public and also dealing with it in my own life, and there's this whole idea that a person doing this could suffer further rejection. So that's why a lot of times I think survivors don't want to open up about the abuse that they've suffered, to let this stuff out, because there's a whole thought that if I do, the family members that I have left will reject me because I'm disclosing the abuse and telling people about it. And also friends might reject me because they just can't deal with it. It's just too hard and too disgusting for them to even know about. That's why a lot of people, I think, stay silent. I couldn't stay silent anymore. It was killing me to stay silent, and I knew that that I just didn't want to go to my grave with this information. I just couldn't handle that. I thought, man, I could not go to my grave with this because what happened to me was incredibly wrong. So many people believed that it was okay in my family, that my parents treated us the way that they did, which was incredibly wrong. And I guess I got to look at it as the fact that these people there's something wrong with them, because it's wrong to beat your children. It's wrong. It's wrong to hurt your children. It's It's wrong to hurt children. Children should not be verbally abused. They should not be called names. They should not be made to feel lesser than. They should not be made to feel like a burden, that the only reason that they exist is because the parents didn't kill them, or it's just not right, and no child should have to feel the pain of being sexually abused and physically abused. That's just not right at all. So for people to sit there and say that there was nothing wrong with the way that our parents treated us, if you're a survivor of child abuse or our caregivers, it's just, I basically can't. I almost just ignore those people, because I'm like, you don't even count in my world. If you don't have enough compassion and empathy to think that hurting a child is okay, if you can't see that hurting a child is incredibly wrong, it's bad enough to hurt a child on accident, you know what I mean? Or to see that children are sick, with diseases and whatnot, or mental disabilities, or, having all these problems. It's just sad enough to see that. Especially diseases and stuff and this and whatnot. They and mental disabilities. They didn't ask for that. But a child doesn't ask to be backhanded and pushed up against the wall and told that they don't count, that they're just a rape child and that they're just a slut and a whore, and at the age of 9 years old. You know what I mean? It's like, that is so incredibly wrong to do to a child. And a father to say that you're just so evil, I should have killed you, or I should kill the whole family. We're just evil. I'll be doing God a favor, walking around, scaring everybody in the middle of the night, making you think this is it, this is the night he's going to kill us, Like, no child deserves to grow up like that, you know what I mean? And it's just, that's what I'm saying. I just don't listen to too many people who don't have any compassion or empathy for children. And think that it's okay to beat on them and torture them and psychologically and emotionally and verbally and physically and sexually abuse them. Those people don't count in my world. I'm sorry. As much as I, have to keep love in my heart because God commands it. But, I don't pay much attention to those people because I care about people who care about people. And, for people that don't care about this situation I just don't pay much attention to them. I don't spend too much time on them. But, so shame wounding from parents and significant others is really what causes this whole thing, right? And it says, while growing in secrecy, the child's shame increases in proportion to the intensity of abuse experienced from the world around him. And as the child matures, the rage that has been generated from previous abuse cannot be restrained and inevitably explodes either towards himself or others. And so it's like you internalize it for so long, and then eventually it has to come out. And, that's why we see a lot of people that do they either hurt themselves or they hurt somebody else. And I mean, I was doing both of that when I was young. You know what I mean? I was quite often hurting myself when I was young, and doing crazy things and, just didn't care most of the time when I was young. I didn't care, especially when I was doing drugs, 13, 14, 15, all the way up until 21. I just didn't even care if I woke up, I'd do so many drugs and I'd be like, I was doing a crystal meth and the crank, that rock, and I'm telling you, I was doing it all. Cocaine and PCP and every kind of hallucinogen you could think of. I would get a hold of just about any kind of hallucinogen you could think of and do that. And I did mushrooms and stuff like that, and not all the time. Mushrooms weren't something I was all that interested in doing all the time, but I was interested in the other stuff for sure. I was doing speed, massive amounts of speed, and smoking marijuana as well, and drinking, and I'm just trying to think of all the stuff that I used to do. But I quit doing all that at the age of 21, thank God. But the thing is when I was about 14, 15 years old, I never cared if I woke up again. I would get so wasted and so high, and so whatever I was doing at the time, drinking or using drugs, that I would be like, if I die, I don't care. That's how much pain I was in. That's how much pain was in my heart. And then when I got older, I started to self-destruct, 18, 19, 20, 21. Started to do things that would hurt myself and to hurt other people. And it was very dangerous to be around. I mean, I could hold a job and stuff like that, but if somebody got in my face, it was always a thought that I could hurt them, And I used to have these thoughts in my head that, like I thought my mom should just kill my dad. And when I was about 14 years old, my mom was telling me that he was trying to rape her again. And I told her, I said, why don't you just take him out, kill him? I'll help you. That was the frame of mind I was in, and this guy at work when I was about, 25 or 26 years old, that's like 11 years later, and I was thinking I could seriously hurt him because he had been putting me down in Spanish and didn't realize that I could speak Spanish, and didn't know that I spoke Spanish, right? I don't look Spanish, and he just assumed that I couldn't speak his language, so he was putting me down in his language. This went on for a couple of weeks. I didn't say anything because I was going to wait and see how to deal with it, and it hurt, and I was just like, I was thinking I could hurt him, and I was cooking, and I was thinking I could take this big pot of boiling water and I could throw it on him. So that's how I used to think. I was very much a destructive person, and it was, I wouldn't want to hurt my friends, but if I didn't consider somebody my friend, they were my enemy. And there was a guy that I used to see. This is how seriously screwed up I was, like from the abuse that I suffered and from my parents and what they put on us, Like this guy was wanting to date me, and he really liked me, and he was a nice guy, but he was getting too close, and he was getting too close too fast. And so he was kind of scaring me, and one time he came over, and he sort of snuck up to the front door and sort of peeked into my living room, and I saw him, so I went busting out of the door, and I said, "Don't ever do that again." I said, "You know what? I could kill you." I said, "You don't realize what I've been through. You don't realize if you scare me enough and you catch me off guard, I could kill you because it's my self-preservation. I grew up abused. I've been living this way for so long that you don't want to mess with me. So you want to come around, you want to be you don't want to be sneaking around me and stuff like that because I could hurt you and I could kill you." This is where I was at, and up until I was, I'd say 27, 28, I started to mellow out, But this is what happens to people when they're abused and mistreated, and they take on this self-protective modes, and it's like either me or you, buddy, and it's not going to be me. You know what I mean? And that's how I went my whole life, because it was either me in the home or somebody else, and I was worried and concerned for my life and for the life of my brothers and sisters that were still living in the home. And I mean, I was very much aware that at any time it could get out of control. It could escalate. My dad could just go off. He could go completely crazy and kill us, and because he threatened to all the time. It wasn't something like he threatened once and that was it. He was threatening to do this on a weekly basis. My mom was quite often talking about killing me, and it was absolutely horrible way to grow up. So this intense rage, was just always going on inside of me probably from birth, right? Because after I experienced 2 weeks in the home, it would have been, I would say maybe 2 months in the home, it would have been enough to do it, right? It was seriously heavy-duty abuse going on there, and psychotic behavior and craziness, right? So it says, the 4 main categories of child abuse are, he lists them, child sexual abuse, such as rape, incest, and sexual relations between children and adults, emotional abuse, such as intense criticism or humiliation, and the effects of shaming experiences from parents or others, neglect, such as abandonment or long periods of emotional or physical absence, and physical violence, such as beating or inflicting physical injury throughout childhood. Shame and rage are effects of these causes or emotional responses to these experiences. So that is what shame and rage is, are effects of these causes or emotional responses to these experiences. So you can read this article. I hope that you will go check it out. We're going to continue on tomorrow looking at the actual name, what shame means, development, and then it goes on to talk about rage versus anger, and then envy, and also guilt versus shame, and empathy and bonding and whatnot. So we're going to go on and talk about this all week. So I have about a minute left. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great day. If you need something, and I can possibly do anything to help you find resources, information, or you just need an ear or a shoulder, be sure and get a hold of me. Blog Talk Radio, Facebook, whatnot. We'll be back on tomorrow, same time. Don't forget, Ray Luskin is coming on my show tonight, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Ray Luskin's going to talk to us about healing and wholeness, the stuff that she's found out for people who have survived abuse, right? Child abuse or domestic violence, right? It's so important. Please check it out. It's just going to be awesome. She's a very nice lady, and I got to talk to her the other day, and she's just very awesome. So 7 o'clock p.m. here, same time, same place at 7 o'clock p.m. And then Dreamcatchers right after that at 8 p.m. I'll be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio with Elizabeth Brawley. And that's going to be a great show, too. I hope you will tune into that. So have a great day, everybody. We'll be talking to you real soon. And make sure you keep reaching out. Don't give in. Don't give up. Call a crisis line. Call somebody. But do not ever, ever, ever give up. And that's, so important to me that you realize that you need to stay here with us. And you need to come along this journey with us. And do not ever give up, okay? So we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.